schools. I do want to recognize that the collaboration with the city and the continued support has been unwavering. From J.D. Carlson to the mayor to specifically Adam Kahn and David Hughes, their focus has been on the school safety of our students and our staff, as well as continuing those relationships in a positive way. Even in the last two home football games, you've seen our school resource officers down on the track with our cheerleaders leading in a cheer. So continuing building those positive relationships and ensuring that our students are receiving the very best safe education as possible. So I just want to continue to say, show our appreciation and recognize both the collaboration with the city as well as our school resource officers. Also recently, last week, the Attorney General brought in some binding clarification on the new restraint law, which is very promising, and it reaffirms the work that we continue to do in Albert Lea schools, but across the state. So look for more information to come from Governor Walz on that, but I do foresee the school resource officers being reinstated in many schools across the state. Finally, a strategic plan update. As we paused our work last summer in May, we did that intentionally just because it was May and it was time to sunset or pause our work to know when we came back in September, we can re-engage and accelerate, in which we did last week and as well as we'll be doing this week. So we really did a lot of the story wall, a lot of information capturing and gathering last week, and then this week we really brought in key stakeholders and we'll continue to pull apart the data to create our vision card. And our vision card is really clarifying the North Star and the direction we're going and really laying out the 3-year operational plan. And an operational plan is about the implementation of our strategic goals. So it will become clear on the direction we're going as we start to synthesize the data and really define the next steps. Really excited for that and appreciate all who brought voice and opinion and perspective, and know that when we bring this forward in the 24-25 or next 24, which will be in January, you'll see some clarity on the direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Wagner. Next, our board member reports. Begin with Bruce.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. A couple things. Had a lot of fun here in the last few weeks, seeing some volleyball, soccer, and football. Even though the weather changed a little bit on Saturday, it was still a nice event, and even enjoyed seeing all the little kids and some people get their face painted out there. A couple weeks ago, I did an advocacy call with MSBA, which we're all invited to do, but it's one that frankly I hadn't done before, and I felt my service was needed this time. But it's a real beginning of taking a look at the different items that we would like to use coming forward in the next year through MSBA and present our legislature. Things like you'd mentioned the SRO, and at this time, again, as you've seen, there's no we're not going to probably have a special session over it, but definitely clarifications are happening, and I think that's good. We really do need our SROs to help keep our schools safe. Another big thing is the unemployment payments in the summers, which I'm sure we took part in, but trying to figure out a little bit about funding on that. And then our special ed funding too is another kind of hot button where we're seeing about 50% of it now funded through the state, and we'd like to see more than that. I'd like to give a big thank you to Kim and Angie for putting your name in for our delegate assembly, which will have through MSBA, and it's open to any board member. But what there basically is this is where the different proposals come from the different school districts, and then we choose which to make resolutions and move forward to our state. We'll have a phone call in November sometime, and we'll talk about that ahead of time. But that'll be about an hour or so. We'll go through all the different proposals. And then the resolutions will be in December. It's like a Friday night and a Saturday morning. So have that chance up in Minneapolis to go through that and, set the strategic plan then for the next year. Other than that, I think that's about it. I'll have a meeting, I guess, in October where we'll decide on what proposals to send forward to. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clapp. Kim?
Turn my mic on. Okay, I'll just reiterate what Bruce said, and that is, on October 12th, correct?
October 12th, doors open at 5:30, and the trouble begins at 6.
There you go. We're excited about that event for sure. I also attended the Business Ed Committee meeting, and Gary was there as well. A couple of things that we're working on that I haven't reported on before. We're really looking at ways to recognize students that are going into maybe the trades or transportation areas, and so having a signing day like we do for like athletics. So we're looking at other schools that do that, and gonna make a recommendation to Outwardly High School on that from our committee. And then we're also working on how do we collect all of the education opportunities in the community and not try to duplicate that, but make sure that we're offering between our higher ed institution and our community ed and individual organizations, and kind of bringing that together. So we're taking inventory of that. That's all. I'll let you do the rest.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, is this on? All right, a few things. I attended the homecoming parade last Friday downtown. That was a great event. Looked like everyone was having fun. Thankfully, the rain held back a little bit. I went to a policy committee meeting where we went over the policies on the agenda tonight, and also a curriculum committee meeting, which was very interesting. We went over a few things, and the one that stood out the most to me was we had a demonstration of the new program, EduClimber, which will keep track of the students' progress in real time, and we'll have a good idea of which classrooms might need more help or which students might need more help, and also how effective their interventions are. So that was really interesting.
Yeah, I served on the Ed Committee with Kim, and I have a keen interest in kind of that fast-track college admission and your education major options. I think that's good, and still want to applaud the district for offering credit for welding. I know there's a lot of interest in that with our students, and to secure free college credit is just a bonus. And Kathy pushed us hard in the policy committee. I always look forward to those, Kathy. And I had the good fortune, too, to work with Jim Haney's juniors and seniors with Discover History at the museum. They'll start to have their live presentations this Thursday and Friday, so I'll be there with those students. I've taken the opportunity when I hang out with high school students just the last week or so to ask them about the cell phone policy. You know what? I'm surprised that universally the response has been pretty positive. One kid that I'm working with at the museum said, if I got downtime in class, why can't I just, look at my phone? But he gets it. So I thought the student response was pretty positive, so made me feel good.
Hey, thank you. I'm encouraged to hear that the cell phone policy is working so far. Once again, it's as good as the people that involved in that endeavor, both students, parents, staff. It's a definite issue. I can relate to that long ago when I was in the classroom. I'm also glad to hear that we are recognizing, or we are involving students that are in vocational areas and getting post-high school credit for it. That's wonderful. I've been hoping that would happen for a long time. As far as what I've been involved in, the Education Foundation occupies a lot of my time, and many of you pointed out that we do have an event coming up October 12th at the Wedgwood Cove. That's Thursday, and the doors open at 5:30, and it's not going to be a long, tedious affair. It'll be fast and fun, and I'm looking forward to it. You're all invited. I've heard that the administrative team and I've already received registrations from some. I get to receive all the letters, pick up things from the post office, deposit money in the bank. It's a full-time job, but it's kind of fun. So we're looking forward to that. Couple of you board members indicated that you would be interested in a board evaluation, self-evaluation, and talked this over with Superintendent Wagner, and I think maybe we'll have something about this on the agenda for our next meeting. And the desire is to work this into the strategic planning of the district as a whole. So be ready for that. That's always an worthwhile experience. And I attended the Finance Committee along with Gary and Dave, and Jennifer will have much to say about that. That's it. All right, next on the agenda. Oh, I'm sorry. Andrew, welcome to Andrew Gustafson from the ALC.
Do you want me to talk into a microphone or just use my teacher voice?
Use,
Okay. Yeah, so I'm Andrew Gustafson. I'm a teacher at the Area Learning Center. First, thank you for approving the fundraising student activity account for me. I appreciate that. So I'm the advisor this year for the MapStars program, the leadership class that we have at the ALC. I've had a lot of success with that in the past with Paula Olson, and I'm trying to take those reins and run with that. So I appreciate that. Coming up for the ALC, the MapStars is going to a fall conference in October. We'll be taking a group of students on an overnight. We're going to be working and meeting students from all over the state in the Minnesota Association of Alternative Programming, and working with them on building relationships and leadership skills. So that's coming up for us. The 7th graders are going to be going to the rendezvous sometime this month. I guess I don't know that exact date. And the 6th graders are going to be going to the History Museum coming up. So we've got some really good things to look forward to with those students. One thing I'll point out, I know that the 5th graders across the district did the kindness retreats this year again. It's been nice that they've been able to get back together with those now that we're well enough past the lockdowns. My MapStar students helped with Halverson's, and so I got to go and kind of poke my head in a little bit with that, and it's such a neat activity and such a neat beginning of the year program that they do. I hope they can continue those kindness retreats. I've also had some great start of school picnics. I didn't go to all of them, but I did go to Hawthorne's because my own children go to Hawthorne, and those are always a lot of fun for the students to see their teachers outside of the classroom, even though it's at the school. Those are good community events. So those are the events that I have to report. I haven't done this before. So do you have any questions for me as the teacher representative?
to see you there, Andrew, and the STARS program. You have a tough act to follow with Paula Anderson,
Yes.
or Paula Olson.
Paul Olson.
Right.
Yep. Yes, she built a great program, and I'm going to do my best to keep that going and continue building that program. Yes.
Okay.
And you said enrollment's around 100 students?
Yep. Like I said, it fluctuates, 105, 95, but we typically have at the ALC a waiting list of students who would like to enter that program and try and take advantage of that, of what we can do for them in terms of making up those credits. I know that since the high school has been doing a lot more after-school and credit recovery programming throughout the year, that has been really, really nice, and that's helped to minimize the amount of students who need this program. But we certainly have those who appreciate that we have it.
Next item on the agenda, I believe, is number 10, effective and efficient operations, and that is in regard to the tax abatement. Yep.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, there's no further presentation not then. So you've heard the presentation. I will entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the resolution for property abatement.
Seconded by Angie. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Energy report. I see Mr. Lund in the audience. All right. Steve?
Lost. Okay, I have a good teacher voice, I don't really need that, but anyway. We've been in our program almost 20 years now, it'll be 20 years in February. And back then, the school board was looking for a way to conserve energy and to, most of the programs, as Bruce will attest to, were, you know, equipment-based. You change out a motor and you'll save some money and this kind of thing. But this was the first program that we were offered, which was employee-based, looking at changing behaviors. How can we save energy by using the people in our district to conserve energy? And so it was a new approach. It's an expensive program that the school district got into, but it was a guarantee that you would save that money back. So it's at no cost, basically, to the district. And the program was started by Energy Education out of Texas. It was started by a school board member that wanted to add air conditioning to their schools and said, but we can't afford the cost of air conditioning. So we're going to cut back on energy and it will come to us at no additional cost. And he was able to do that. So his program sort of spread. In fact, it's been so good that they don't work with schools like us anymore. We're too small. So, their goal was to give us the guidelines to follow. And their program was different in that they had a person on site, which was the energy manager, to monitor and to train the staff. That was very different from any other program. Other programs, we'll change out the motor and then we'll tell you whether it's doing a good job for you. Whereas this one is we're monitoring it ourselves. We're not allowing them to do that. Frequently, staff will say, well, he's out checking computers. Well, my training took 4 years. It was almost like another college degree. It took 4 years. I had to attend seminars every year, 3 different seminars on 2 days each. We had to take online classes. So hopefully it didn't take me that long to learn how to check a computer. We look at broad-based things like lighting, we look at heating, we look at windows, doors, we look at it all, except we don't really focus on equipment. That's the job of the school district. So that's kind of the background. My job is to basically work with teachers to show them ways that they can reduce their energy. My job is to show them how it can be done. My job is not to make them do that. I make recommendations. It's up to the administration, it's up to the staff as to whether they're going to follow the recommendations or not. I do weekly audits to say, all right, you're doing this, you're doing that. But, so I don't have authority to see that this is done, but we have very good cooperation from especially our custodians and our staff. So it's been very good. Let's see here. You can see here that our savings over the 20 years that we've been in existence here is almost $6.5 million, or over $6.5 million. So the program has shown that it's successful. It does exactly what they proposed to the board and what the board bought. So it's been a very successful program, and we monitor that all the time to see that. Somehow that kind of got scrunched in there. I picked out several years, boy, what happened to that slide? It really. Okay, but basically, I'm looking at 2002, 2003. That's our base year. That was before we started the program. So everything is based off that year. And we also factor in all of our numbers climate. So if we have a warmer summer or a colder winter, it factors that in. That's all done. And in 2002, 2003, our base, we were spending about $665,000 or a little over. And this past year, our expenditures were $994,000. And that's basically, as I'll show you, due to increased energy costs, not what it did involve is a 37.35 savings. I don't know what happened to that slide. It was fine when I, but yeah. And our goal has always been we're told that about 30% of the energy we use, whether it's in your home or whether it's in schools or in your business, is waste. So our goal has always been to find at least 30% of that. We want the waste gone. And our focus is not on making students uncomfortable or making teachers work in the dark or anything like that. Our goal is to focus on the time when children are not in school. How can we reduce the expenditures during that time? And a good example is, a custodian comes in at 6 o'clock in the morning. We don't want them turning on all the lights in the building because really, we don't have that many teachers showing up at 6 o'clock in the morning that we can warrant turning on all the lights. We encourage them to turn on enough lighting so there's safe passage through the school so they can walk through. But really, we don't want the lighting, full lighting until teachers arrive and students are about to arrive. So that's something we focus on a lot. You can see our savings this past year were $588,954. And that's kind of a nebulous number because what happens when the costs go up, your savings go up, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's what happens. And unfortunately, our costs have gone up tremendously, and so let's look at the individual. First, electricity, and our costs increased about 7.3% over the previous year, which is not huge, but we've had some very big increases in that over the past year. And on the left-hand side, you see the base year. This is what we're using, and that's what we want to focus on. We were using 6,366,000 plus kilowatts. If you look over at this past year, we used 4,469,000 plus kilowatts. So we're focused. We can keep that number in line, but we can't do much with costs. That's out of our control. The next thing is the demand. And the demand is the measurement that they take over, they're continuously measuring our energy, and they will take the peak out of our day. Whenever the highest amount of energy is used in the day, that becomes your cost for the month. So when we come in and throw everything on in the building and the energy peaks, the electricity peaks, that will determine our cost. So what we try to do is get them to space it out. Don't go throw on all the electrical appliances at one time. And that's a very important part of the cost, because that determines our rate. You can see here how our costs have gone up. Back in 2002, our base year, we were paying 0.069 cents per kilowatt. Now we're up to 13, over almost 14 cents a kilowatt. You can see electricity is not penny cheap anymore. And our total cost, even though we're far below what we were in 2002, 2003, our cost still increased to 623,000 plus. So our costs have gone up. We can't control that, but that's just, but it would have been a lot higher had we not been involved in the program. Our natural gas, that increased 11.7% over the previous year. And again, if you look at 2003, 4, the number of therms we used, and we are still using far less therms. And the cost of these therms have gone up tremendously, doubled in that amount of time plus, and our costs have increased during that time. But, you know, at least we're keeping our usage down. And that's been difficult, you know, with, we're never in control of the winter and how much electricity or how much heating we'll use at that time. Water and sewer, that had a slight increase over the previous year. You can see we're not saving money on water and sewer. We have for years. This last year was not a good year for us in that we had several leaks in buildings that were big users before we found them. And also we've done a tremendous amount of irrigation out at the field. And, you know, with the kind of summer we've had this year, you can about imagine how much water they pumped on that field or the practice areas to keep them going. So we haven't done as well there, but again, we can't control that necessarily. Oh, all these wanted to shift. Okay, there are 3 categories here that we're looking at. Minnesota B3, that's, I not only send our data to energy education every month, but we also send it to the state. We're required to send it to the state. So I have to do it twice. That's just the way it is. And what I get back from them is a rating of each of our buildings to show how they compare with similar buildings with similar use in the state of Minnesota, which is good because, you know, it's difficult to compare yourself to a school in Florida, you know, for example. Our use is totally different. So if the high school has a score of 77, it means it's doing better than 77 of the schools out of 100 with similar size and similar use and so forth, similar age probably. Southwest, you see that number is very low. And that is, as I remind you each year, Southwest heats Sibley. And there's no way I can factor in what the cost of heating Sibley is. So it makes Southwest look like they're not very efficient, where they're really quite efficient. They're doing 2 buildings at that point. The other low number is Hulverson, and we've had a problem keeping that building in line for the past few years, but they've done a lot of things now to improve that. They changed out windows and some lighting and things like that. So that's that's helping there. And Sibley, of course, looks very good because they don't heat the building there. So obviously, they're very strong. Energy Star, that's a national program that we participated in. And they give us a number based on anything over 75 would qualify you as an Energy Star building. And that's what we aim to be at. And we do real well there. Again, Southwest is the only one that would miss that, but that again is a factor of Sibley School. And then I've given you the cost per square feet, so you can see just exactly where our costs are. And, you know, the fact that the high school and Southwest are similar in cost per square foot is remarkable, because you have a pool at the high school, you have a greenhouse at the high school, you have gymnasiums, auditoriums. Of course, Southwest has gymnasium too, but the high school is used much more. So they've done well there. And, you know, we're seeing the result of the geothermal that was put in. And our district average is about $1.32. So it's a pretty good number. The next one is the cost per day. You can see exactly what we spend per day. In the district, we spend about $2,690 a day. And that's, you know, and that's what I try to impress on the staff is, you see if you can cut lights 1 hour a day, what it means to us, you know? Or if we cut back the heat at a certain time during the day, that's tremendous savings to us. And then it breaks it down as to what it costs per building per day, and you can see that the high school obviously is higher, but it has more square feet. Southwest does well considering the age of the building and so forth. Hawthorne is amazing, but being a two-story building, anything that's lost just goes up to the second floor or the third, you know, so it's savings there. Bruce will remember back when Lakeview was our most expensive building in town. And Lakeview has really brought that in line. So it's done very, very well. Now we're working on getting Halverson to that same point. So that's been good. And okay. Somehow we're not going, but. Well, basically the last slide was just a comparison on the conservation. It said our savings would be equal to 884,168 trees grown for 10 years, or it would be equal to 7,148 passenger cars removed from the roads. And so it does. And I've always tried to impress on people that, because I hear this all the time, that doesn't take much energy, you know. That computer doesn't take much, or that monitor doesn't take much energy. Well, the focus of this program is picking up a penny when you see it on the ground, you know, because if you pick up 100 of those, it's dollars. And, you know, that's what we want our staff to understand is, just think if everyone in our country and our nation would save 1 kilowatt a day. What would that mean? How many power plants could be shut down? You know? So we don't look at it as, well, that's just a small savings, let it be. We go for each one of them. And obviously the big hanging fruit was picked a long time ago, and now we're down to the point where we're looking for the small things. And questions you have? No, it wasn't. Right, and that's what it took, you know, we had to have the buy-in from the staff, because I couldn't possibly go around and do all of those things. Yeah, I mean, it shows you that if you're picking up the pennies, they're gonna, you know, even the small amount that a computer saves, but if you have 500 computers, you know, and that's a battle we had at first. And I said, okay, I did the numbers, and I said, yeah, it'll save us, this was 20 years ago. I said, it'll save us $48,000. Oh. And we'd just come out of a period in this district, Neil will attest to, we got by with very little money. We went without a lot of things. That was big money back then, because we were making cuts in programs that would save us $5,000. I mean, so we looked at it as a big deal. Yeah. And who gave me that name? Yes, I am the prince. Yeah. I know it. You still get them. No. Other questions? You know, I practice what I preach. I do. Can't say my wife does as well, but I do. She likes to, because she's been cold at home.
Our own personal habits.
Right. You know, you often hear, well, why should I? Because there are wealthy people flying around private jets. I can't control the private jets, but I can control what I do. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Now, number 10.3, approval of the 2024 preliminary levy.
Thank you, everybody. So, big night, talking about the levy. I put in the board packet the summary, which I'm not going to refer too much tonight. This gets into a tremendous amount of detail of a 39-page document, which was also in the board packet. I think it's important to remember tonight, we are simply, what I will be asking is that you approve the proposed levy at the maximum. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But then in December, we will actually approve the levy for a very specific dollar amount. So let's get started. Whoops. So starting with the general fund, this is where we are seeing the largest increase. The total increase from last year to the 23 pay 24 levy is $739,063.67. And there's some reasons, obviously, for that increase. The first reason is that when the voters approved our operating referendum, they did approve that would increase by inflation. And MDE, Minnesota Department of Education, sets what that inflation rate is. And for the pay 24 levy, that will be 2.57%. One of the larger reasons for this increase also is that we have an adjustment. Every year I explain, and I will explain this year, that our levy is really based on a couple of different things. It is the items that we are levying for, and then there are the prior year adjustments. And the adjustments generally are adjusting to actual as opposed to estimates that we were making back when that levy was approved. In this case, this goes back to fiscal year 21-22. It's a $200,000 adjustment for the levy portion of our referendum. So back when we approved that levy, we were making some assumptions on our pupil count. The actual ended up larger, and so now we are recognizing, or we will be recognizing, that revenue that we are entitled to based on our actual pupil units for FY '22. This is where things get a little bit complicated. So many of the things in the general fund, we have a levy portion and a state aid portion. And that's true of our operating referendum, our local optional revenue, our operating capital, our long-term facilities maintenance funds. And the balance of those two, levy and aid, is based upon the per pupil amount of our tax base. So what we've seen recently is that our tax base has been increasing pretty dramatically last year, not nearly as dramatically for this levy. I'll show you that later. Our tax base is going up, but our enrollment is staying the same or going down. So our per pupil tax base is increasing. And as that increases, that levy mix, or that mix between levy and aid changes. And the change is that more comes via the levy and less via state aid. So total revenue, when I look at things like I mentioned, referendum, operating capital, LTFM, local optional revenue, our total revenue that we will be recognizing is actually going to be less based on some assumptions for FY '25. Our total revenue will be down that $272,000, but the levy portion is increasing fairly significantly. And I just took operating capital as an example. For the 21 pay 22 levy, the levy portion of operating capital was 26.4% of the total revenue. Last year's levy, it was 28.3% of the total revenue. And for this levy, it's 35.1% of the total revenue. So, you know, we've gone up about 9% in the levy portion of these revenue items. So between the $200,000 adjustment and that shift in the levy versus aid revenue, that's what's accounting for the increase. Then when we go to community ed, it's a different story. We're actually looking at a decrease in community ed. In the past, we've had no state aid component to community ed, and that changed this year. Now we are getting about $90,000 in state aid that is replacing what would have been levy in prior years. And the per resident amount that we are getting for community ed went up slightly. So what we're seeing is about $90,000 in state aid rather than levy, and that's what's causing this decrease, but we're also seeing a total increase in community ed revenue of a little over $15,000 because of that higher per resident amount that we're getting. And then moving to the final component of the levy is debt service. If you will think back to just about this time last year when I was asking you to approve issuing the additional bonds or the bonds that we had remaining on the voter-approved vote for the Hammer and Halverson complex, we said at that time that it would not increase our debt service levy. And I'm happy to report that that is turning out to be the case. So debt service levy is going down by $34,000, and it is calculated on looking at the fiscal year '25 principal and interest that we will be paying on all of our bonds plus 5%. That's just the way the state does it. And then over time, that 5% builds up, and then we always get a debt service adjustment based on excess debt service fund balance. And, you know, on this summary, you will see those negative adjustments for the debt service excess fund balance. And this does include, we will have bond payments in FY '25 for that, the school security measures that we approved last year. So this is a chart we always like to look at. The history of the school property tax on a $100,000 residential home. That is what the county and city tell us is the, I'm not sure if it's median or average home value in our district. So you can look back as far as 2017, you know, we were over $400,000 for that $100,000 home. And we recognize that a home valued in 2017 at $100,000, that's not what that home value is anymore, because our home values have been going up. Not as dramatically this year. Last year, we had a 4.18% increase on our levy, but what a $100,000 home paid in the school district portion of their levy actually went down pretty dramatically. Now this year, it is going to go up about 4.37% from $366 to $382, but still far less than a home valued at that amount paid 2017 through 2022. And just a reminder of the Ag to School bond credit. This is something the legislature put into effect, I believe it was about 5 years ago, and it has ramped up every year until 2023. Now we have reached the maximum. So this is our property owners who own ag land for voter-approved bonds. They are actually getting relief of the 70% of what that ag land would have paid in the past toward those bond payments. Now the state is picking that up. That comes to us as state aid. And that does show on the property tax statements for people who own that type of property. It does show them what that credit is. So that's pretty powerful. So here's what it looks like. You can see where we were on the levy last year. The general fund is going up, as I mentioned, the $739,000 or 11.62%. Community service, the percent is decreasing 37.74%. Debt service decreasing just a little over 1%. But we are looking at an overall increase of 6.67%. So the total proposed levy right now is $10,065,000, well, $10,665,687.41, and that is a 6.67% increase. Our tax base does continue to increase, but not at the rate it was doing previously. And this number will change a little bit because they rerun these numbers about every month. But right now, the referendum market value increase is at 3.12%, and the net tax capacity increase is 7.8%. Now, every day, the Department of Education runs that 39-page report. And they run it based on changes that I might make for anticipated enrollment or other items that we have some discretion on levying. But what we've seen this year is that there have been many errors on the side of MDE. Now, this particular levy run, which was from last week, this was the amount that we were seeing for about 4 or 5 days running. And we really do go through this line by line, and I believe that this is pretty accurate. The levy run from Friday, which is the most recent, shows a vastly different number that we know has lots of errors. For many reasons, it is important, and I highly recommend to the school board that we approve this proposed levy at the maximum. And all that means is that between now and the 30th of the month, as Minnesota Department of Education continues to generate and correct these levy runs, that we will be able to look at in December the most accurate levy run. I do believe it is going to be very close, if not identical, to the information I gave you tonight, but we want to give ourselves the opportunity to look at this in December and, make decisions based on what we could levy, as opposed to a number right now that's out there that is significantly less and we know is inaccurate. So my request to Chairman Score and the rest of the school board is that you would approve this certification of the proposed 23, pay 24. How many times I look at this, and I missed that, I apologize, levy for the maximum levy authority.
Thank you, Jennifer. At this time, I would entertain a motion, and then we can ask questions and have discussions.
I'll move to approve.
Move to approve by Bruce. Seconded by Kim. Now, any questions or discussion,
Just a comment.
comments?
I've learned over all of my years of life and on the school board, there's nothing more confusing than school finances. From 22, 23 to 25, 26. Jennifer, I don't know how you guys keep track of it, but thank you for going through that. I mean, I sure, every year we talk about this, we do the max and we're able to work with a number hopefully less than that. But we sure don't want to do a number less than that and not be able to approve enough to fund our school district.
Right.
So thank you for watching these numbers. We've talked about how important they are, and again, like I said, it's confusing to everyone. Thanks.
One question. Assuming we approve this, at these same numbers in December, for the people concerned about their property taxes, will they see the increase of the 4.37%, not the 6.67%?
Yeah, this is assuming in that case that a $100,000 home remains valued at about $100,000 from one year to the next. Yes, they would see a lesser amount because our tax base is increasing. So that increase lessens the amount that a individual taxpayer would see. That's why they wouldn't see the 6.67%. I think sometimes it's confusing that you think, well, as the tax base goes up, our levy goes up, and that is not the case. Our levy is for a specific dollar amount, and it is spread out over our tax base. As the tax base is larger, individuals pay less. If our tax base were to shrink, then for that same dollar amount, individuals would pay more. But they're paying a little less than the levy percent because the tax base is increasing.
Chair and directors, I just want to recognize Executive Director Walsh and her team. I agree in monitoring this. There's a lot of technical language in this, but I do believe your explanation to Director Hoffman was very pragmatic and kind of gave that context. So that will be good for us to continue to revisit, just viewing it through that lens. But thank you again for this.
You're right, Dave, it is complicated, and as I understand it, as our tax base goes up, that means that locally we have the capacity to raise more dollars, and so our state aid goes down. Right.
That's another very good way of putting it, yes.
Okay, and as I understand it, the final decision of this comes in December, and if we were to not vote for your recommendation and come up with something less, we would not be able to make that. We couldn't move upward in December.
Right,
We'd
right.
go
We would
down.
only ever be able to under levy. We
Right.
could never
So
increase.
There's really no cost in us.
There is no reason not to approve
Right,
it at the
right.
maximum at this
It- we
point.
could- it-
Where
it
it doesn't
could-
lock us into
It
anything.
could only hurt us to do otherwise.
Right.
Any other questions, discussions? All right, it has been moved and seconded to accept the proposal to approve the maximum levy for 22, 23, pay 24. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Jennifer. Policies. Kathy.
Thank you, Chair Score. And I'd like to recognize the Policy Committee, Director Schindler, Director Hoffman, and Director Valerio, who we shifted our meeting a day so that we could have 3 members there. We did go a lot longer than we would before a study session, but I think the committee appreciated the time and energy to review these policies. So also like to thank Darcy, who spent a lot of time redlining all of these policies from MSBA against our current policies. So, and then Ashley also attended the meeting, and I believe she sent to the committee questions that they had, and I don't believe we got any additional questions. So moving forward, these are the policies up for review. Remember, these are not considered significant by MSBA, so can be approved without 3 readings. So the first is the development, adoption, and implementation of policies, Policy 208. What this essentially does is adds 3 policies, or it lists 3 policies that are mandatory for you to review as a board. And they are student discipline, which you will see 506, which is on review tonight. 722, which is public data requests, which you did review, I believe, in June. And 806, which is the crisis management policy, which will come before you. It'll come to the October Policy Review Committee and then come to you at the regular session in October. So that is a change. There were quite a few that were in this earlier this year. They were removed and crisis management was added. So it is just the addition of 1 new policy for the board to review annually. The drug-free workplace, drug-free school. You have seen this policy several times over the last couple of years. And with the last legislative session, and I will try to pronounce all these words correctly, it expands the prohibition of medical cannabis on school campuses to non-intoxicating cannabinoids and edible cannabinoids. It reflects the marijuana legalization passed this last legislative session. It also requires education programs begin starting in the 26-27 school year. The next policy up for review is student discipline. And as you have heard from principals and the superintendent over the last several months, this has added non-exclusionary disciplinary practices for all of our schools. It also limits recess detention and dismissals for grades K-3, which I know our elementary principals are working on that with their buildings. It directs us to establish uniform criteria for dismissal and provide continuing instruction. And that is something we do already. It is now in statute and in policy. And we will be providing an addendum to the policy after the school, after our building principals work with their teams to define multiple categories that are now required in statute. It defines reasonable force reporting, and Sheila Reeby's office reports that. It is not a new reporting, it's just more reporting. So not just special education staff and students, but all staff and students. It requires a notification to MDE of policy violations of reasonable force and other disciplinary issues. And it also requires a discipline complaint procedure for our families. And we have a committee that has developed that, and it is available on our website. So that is several changes to student discipline, and I know principals are reviewing those with their teams and their building staff. The corporal punishment and prone restraint, this is the policy that Superintendent Wagner referred to earlier. And as he indicated, we have limited prone restraint in the past, and this expands this and also refers to our agents, our police officers, SROs, and we are working through that with our Albert Lea Police Department and our current SROs. It also references last year, if you remember, we did a big change to the maltreatment of minors. which moved from criminal offense to public health offense. And so every policy where that's referenced, we have to adjust that. So there is a reference to maltreatment of minors. The bullying prohibition policy, the biggest change to this was adding malicious and sadistic conduct prohibition. It defines it. It also references sexual exploitation. And then it updates general policy statement and notification to our students and our staff and our families. The last may seem like a small change, but is rather a big change where it redefines directory information, and that is what would be public information on our students and staff. We are to exclude a student's address, a student's telephone number, a student's email address, or other personal contact information is no longer considered directory information. So we're working through what that means. We know we do have, in particular, the one I think of is the senior, when our seniors graduate, we often have parent organization who asks for that information. And we'll have to work through that because it is no longer directory or public information. And there also is a notification of violations of this. So parents can opt out of releasing any information. And then if we violate that, we must notify the Department of Ed and the family that we've released information that's now in statute. So some significant changes in the legislature. These, of course, are not all of them, but these are the ones that, as school is up and under, we're running, we want to make sure that we are in line in these policies moving forward. Any questions? Correct. You can entertain a motion to approve them en masse. So this is the third presentation of the overdose medication 516.5. We have moved forward in our committee meeting. Sheila Reby has headed that up as our naloxone coordinator for the district with our licensed school nursing staff and Superintendent Wagner. And they have met, they've established protocols for the district team and have reached out to building principals for their site teams. They are working closely with the Minnesota Department of Health and the Minnesota Department of Education, who has been providing us, most districts, generous support to implement this without too many barriers, with access to the medication as well as the standing orders coming from the Minnesota Department of Health.
Okay, so I would entertain a motion to approve the overdose medication policy. Moved by Angie, seconded by Dave. Questions, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, we have exhausted the agenda. Unless I hear something to the contrary, I will declare this meeting adjourned.